What's up, everybody, and welcome to the UTS Accounting Weekly Show. My name is Dr. Amanda White.
And I'm Dr. Nelson Ma. So how are you doing this week?
It's been a long weekend. I don't know if are you feeling more sleep deprived with the change in daylight savings?
I just slept straight through it. And I just, for the life of me, I don't know where my time went. So yeah, I'm actually feeling a little more
Well,
tired.
you lose an hour, so that's okay. But
Yeah.
my kids have been getting up earlier and earlier and earlier for
Mm.
about the last 3 weeks to the point where they were getting up at 5 a.m. because that's when the sun was
Right.
rising. Even though they have blockout shutters, they're
Mm.
like the light cracking through their natural body clocks.
Yep.
So now that the clock has moved forward, they're now getting up at 6 a.m.
Oh,
instead
that's worked
of 5.
out. That's worked out well for you.
It's worked out well. And I'm trying to put them to bed at 8 p.m. to sort of get them into that rhythm.
Mm.
And now that it's starting to warm up to encourage that, we're also swimming in our pool. So I'm like, hey, do you want to go for a swim? Because that'll help tire them out so that they're good to go to sleep. Me, on the other hand, I'm still adjusting. But yeah, it's nice to have a long weekend. But we are back here in week 9. What are the big stories of this week?
Right. So this is very relevant to university students. The cost of coffee is set to increase due to a supply shortage. Yeah,
Uh-oh.
scary times, especially going into final assessments and exam period. So the price of coffee is up about 21.6% this year to $3.65 per kilogram. So keep in mind, this is not necessarily what you pay, but rather what the importers pay. And
Yep.
analysts are pointing to poor growing conditions. So climate-related weather events like droughts are killing coffee plants, mostly in Brazil. And this is expected to last as long as 3 years. So, Amanda, what does this mean for coffee drinkers?
So there are lots of steps in the supply chain process. Obviously, people grow coffee beans. Coffee beans then need to be transported. They need to be roasted, packaged, and then on-sold to either cafes
Mhm.
or even in your local supermarket. So this is going to affect cafes who are going to have increases in their supply costs. So
Mhm.
increase on all of their inputs. And if you're a coffee drinker, also, you're going to see that increase as well. So the suppliers will have increase in their costs, and they will usually pass those on.
Yeah.
And there's also greater demand for coffee. So I think as people are also sitting at home, and making a coffee at home is much cheaper than buying a coffee at your local cafe, people are probably consuming more coffee on average. And I think there's been a demand for coffee of 7% increase in imports. And we don't grow any coffee here.
Mm.
I don't know if it's the right conditions, or I don't think we grow a lot of coffee here.
Mm.
Mostly it's imported coffee. You mentioned Brazil. So that whole South American contingent, my husband's very partial to Ecuadorian and Peruvian coffee as well. But then also when you think about places, for example, Ethiopia, a lot of coffee that comes from Africa will also probably hit supply issues once COVID affects,
Yeah.
workforces,
Yeah.
transportation,
Yeah.
shipping, shipping costs have gone through the roof with COVID as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the Australia Post. Somebody tweeted from inside an Australia Post warehouse in Melbourne, and they've paused collections from retail outlets or
Mm.
like their
5 days.
customers for 5 days so they could try and catch up on the backlog. So
That's
posting
crazy.
and delivery is also affecting this.
Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, we're expecting everyone to pay a little more for their coffee. So coming on from this, so cafes obviously will need to spend a little bit more to buy their coffee, but you'll think, okay, maybe they'll recoup their costs and everything will be fine. But what are the real accounting impacts of this?
So it's not as simple as, oh well, coffee has gone up, a certain number of dollars per kilo. We're just going to increase our prices by
Mm.
this much. You need to think about how much people are willing to pay for coffee,
Mm.
and will people, take into account, oh well, the price of coffee has gone up, so I'm willing to pay 20 cents more.
Mm.
And then you've also, it's a low margin product. My dad ran a coffee a cafe under the KPMG building on Clarence Street for many, many years before they relocated.
Yep.
And, it's low margin. So you make very little profit on each cup and you make money from selling a large volume of coffee.
Yeah.
It's not like selling Aston Martins or Ferraris where you make big margin on a small number of sales.
Yeah.
So you can pass on those costs, but usually passing on those costs is spread between thousands and thousands of customers.
Yeah.
For cafes who are located in city areas or that haven't been open for a while, that aren't getting all that passing traffic inside shopping centers, walking strips, etc., then it's going to end up being more that they're going to have to pass on because they're not selling the volume. And this is where I think, COVID has seen that there's been a lot of loyalty to small, individual cafes. And I think that's something that we have here in Australia that's really fantastic is this cafe culture that people have their local. And while we do have some big chains, you have McDonald's, you have 7-Eleven and their $1 coffee, which I've never had. I don't know if it's any good. Is it good?
It's not bad. It's drinkable. Like if you're really tired.
If you're really tired. It's true. For $1, you can't go wrong. There's McDonald's, but we have such of this great, strong, small cafe culture. And I think the other thing that makes a difference here is tap and go. So when you were like scrounging for change, 20 cents extra was something you probably didn't, I only have like coins for my regular coffee is $3. Now it's $3.20.
Yeah.
I think now with tap and go, businesses can make small price changes with people noticing less because they just tap. Like, the person will say it. You won't even be thinking about how much it is because you're scrolling on your phone or you're listening to a podcast and you'll just tap. So it's possible that they could, potentially get away with more of a price rise as well because just this change in consumer behavior.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, but I can certainly see, people with the increase in costs, instead of people buying, coffee every day of the week, they might just buy it 4 days a week, just for financial reasons. I can imagine.
For financial reasons. And it used to be as well that you'd make more on muffins, banana bread, toast. Yeah. So you've got to think about, am I still making those margins from those add-ons that people buy? Just like when you go to the supermarket and you walk past, the magazines, the chewing gum, the chocolate, and the things on the end caps, that's where all the money is. Yeah.
And that's kind of why they have they said like those cheap milk. And it's because you'd have to walk all the way to the end of the store and buy the cheap milk. But on the way out, they'd like sell you all this other stuff. So that's where they get their money back.
That is me all the time. That's Aldi and its special deals. You go in for milk and some mints and you come out with like, I don't know, a water pressure cleaner or some other, unusual thing that they have to sell.
Too tempting. So moving along, our second story, the era of cheap money might be coming to an end. So first it was the Central Bank of Norway. Now it's the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. They are both. So New Zealand is expected to hike their interest rates this Wednesday. It's a move to combat inflation. So we, think about the coffee story that we just talked about.
Prices rising. Yep.
Demand outstrips supply, whether it be increased demand or lower supply. And so they're expecting. So everyone can expect higher interest rates, and this is kind of the world sort of viewing this as kind of the first steps towards higher interest rates. So what do you think this means for people in general?
And when we say cheap money, we mean cheap to borrow money.
Cheap to borrow money.
So when you're in a recession, interest rates fall to make it easier for businesses to borrow money to stay afloat. Not necessarily, you and I as home builders, but as homeowners, lower interest rates mean you can buy a block of land, build a bigger house. So interest rates are used as a thing to try and stimulate or hold back the economy. So when you lower interest rates and you can afford to build a bigger house, that creates, it's I don't know whether trickle-down economics actually works, but the idea that, if you give, I guess this isn't really trickle-down because it's not really big business, but if people spend more on their houses, then the builders get more money, then the builders are spending more with their suppliers and the suppliers are spending more and giving more to their employees.
Yeah.
So, that's what we say when we say cheap money, it's cheap
Yeah.
to borrow
Just
money.
borrow money.
And so when central banks increase their interest rates, it means that the cost to borrow money becomes higher. So that's
Yeah.
looking to try and constrain spending a little bit. Businesses will pay more in their interest expense. If you have a mortgage, you'll pay more on your principal and interest repayments. And most international central banks have interest rates currently set at zero. We can't go into negative,
No.
but it's zero. So they're looking to move up, and we're going to see global shifts, I think, in this area.
Absolutely. And so, thinking about how this affects, the accounting of companies on the stock market. So if we're talking about, companies presumably with high debt will now pay higher interest expenses, which means a decrease in profit. But besides this, what can we say about this higher interest rates on how companies, their stock prices and relative to their accounting will?
A lot of this is going to depend on how leveraged the business is. So how much debt the business has compared to their assets. The more debt that they have, the more that interest payment is going to be. Businesses that don't have a lot of debt, an increase in interest rates doesn't affect them very much. It will increase into their profits, but not to the same extent. So businesses that have grown on a lot of borrowed money and then maybe see a contraction in consumer demand because goods are more expensive, could get caught in this situation where they're unable to pay their debts as they fall due. And this is a risk for businesses. Certainly right now in Australia, we've had lots of businesses receive, an amnesty on their payments for business loans. So the interest on those loans keeps ticking over and your debt keeps growing. But once interest rates go up, that debt is going to start to accumulate faster and businesses are going to have trouble paying it back. From an individual perspective, from a household, you need to look at how much debt you have. And if interest rates go up a couple of steps or a couple of points, that could really, if you're on a variable rate home loan, really increase the amount that you have to pay each month. The stock market will take this into account. They will look for companies that are highly debt leveraged, way too much debt, and potentially revise what they think that company should be worth. And you might see sell-offs or declines in share prices for those businesses because the market is starting to get worried that they may not be a going concern with interest rates increasing. Now, the other thing that changing interest rates also throws a spanner in the works is that as interest rates go up, that also drives more overseas investment because people are like, where am I going to put my money? And once a government increases its interest rates, maybe New Zealand might look more attractive than Australia. That means people will be buying more New Zealand dollars to invest in New Zealand and maybe less US dollars or something else. So that's also going to change interest rates, or it's going to result in fluctuations in interest rates. We've seen that here in Australia in the past where our high interest rates compared to the US also drove an increase in foreign currency. So for example, our dollar against the US, which means it's cheaper for imports, but more expensive for people who are exporting. So for a lot of our top three exports, mining, education, commodities, tourism, that makes those things more expensive. So there's so many moving parts in all of this that it's not just one thing that is going to, affect one thing. It's one, this is the butterfly effect. And the globalization of markets means that, a change in Norway could result in a change in other European central banks, which could then result in a change in, a whole lot of areas. And Evergrande is one great example. We're all waiting and watching to find out what happened. They missed another debt interest payment. The share went into the shares went into a trading halt on the Hong Kong exchange. And so we're all like, oh, what could happen? Because the flow and effects could be massive. If the Chinese property development market slows, the demand for iron ore and steel and coal for high thermal efficiency coal is going to decrease. That's going to affect mining company revenue. That's going to affect, especially if you're the WA state government, their taxes on mining firms as well, which is then going to affect, potentially what services they can provide. So we really are in this interwoven international economy now where a small thing can have a really big flow on effect across the entire world.
Absolutely.
So after all that doom and gloom, it's beautiful weather in Sydney, and we're going to be coming out of lockdown soon. And certainly, we're going to be enjoying sunshine and going outside of our LGA and seeing families, but we need to keep on track for our studies. So Nelson, what is your tip for this week?
My tip for this week is confidence. So I know, some of you may feel like you're falling behind in some of your subjects, sort of left them to the side because you had other major assessments due, and now you're coming back to these subjects that have major assessments and you feel like a bit overwhelmed. But it's important to remember that most of your subjects, you probably can there's still 50, 60, 70% of the marks outstanding. And so it's never too late to actually get back into the subject, maybe even start from the beginning and just start going through each topic. You definitely have the time. It's just a matter of, are you willing to put in this time now to make sure that you're going, that you're doing
full-time
okay.
Full-time uni should be like full-time work. So if you're doing 4 subjects, you should be spending 40 hours a week going to class and study. That's really important.
Absolutely.
My tip this week is that the exam timetable is now out in your online student portal. So check your exam timetable, start thinking about that study plan. But I've had a lot of students contact me and say, oh, look, I've got 2 exams at the same time. What do I do? So if you have a clash, what you should do is you should just search UTS exams and you'll see a page about the UTS spring final exams. And then you want to scroll down to the section that says scheduling difficulties. It'll describe what is a scheduling difficulty. So you have, 3 or more exams within a 24-hour period, COVID-related circumstances, medical issues, you're representing the university, significant religious event, a significant personal event, loss or bereavement, urgent travel, most of us can't go anywhere, service commitments like you're in the Army Reserve or something, a UTS representative issue. So check out all of the scheduling difficulties. Going on holidays is not considered a scheduling difficulty, unfortunately, or sport or leisure activities. But if you do have a clash, you can apply, and it's called Advice of Scheduling Difficulties. There's a PDF form, fill that in, follow the instructions, and submit that to let the university know that you do have a difficult whatever is going on.
Yes.
So, yeah. That's all we have this week for week 9. That means 10, 11, 12, only 3 weeks left of term. Of course, if you have any questions for us, you can always pop them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer them next week. But have a great week, Nelson.
You too. All right.
See you later, everyone.
Bye.